The arrival of August 13th, 1994, drapes the hotel zone of Cancun in that deceptive stillness that so often precedes chaos. Palm trees sway gently in the Caribbean breeze as the neon lights of luxury hotels stain the white band with artificial colors. Inside the security booth of the Playa Dorada resort, Ricardo Hernández Vega watches his analog camera monitors with the weary routine of a man who has kept this same vigil for 3 consecutive years. But this night is different. On monitor number 4, the figures moving through the pool area do not walk as late-night guests should. There is something in their gait that makes the skin on the 28-year-old guard's arms prickle. Their movements are too fluid, too coordinated, as if following a pattern the human mind cannot fully process. Ricardo picks up his worn leather logbook and, with a trembling hand, jots down a sentence that will haunt him for 3 decades. What I saw that night were not human. His pen freezes on the page. The silence of the early morning grows heavier, denser, charged with a tension he cannot explain. Cancun, the Mexican tourist paradise where millions seek an escape from reality, has just become the epicenter of a nightmare that defies all logic. The sense of security that cocoons the 5-star resorts is about to crumble forever, but no one knows it yet. The guests sleep soundly in their air-conditioned rooms, oblivious to the horror unfolding beneath the Caribbean stars. Exactly 30 years have passed since that August night. 30 years of silence, of nightmares, of unanswered questions that have eaten away at the conscience of a man who chose to stay quiet rather than face a truth no one would be willing to believe. Just 4 months ago, while cleaning out his old rusted metal locker, Ricardo discovered something that would change everything. A partially burned photograph showing 2 deformed silhouettes by the seashore. The image is so damaged that the outlines are barely distinguishable, but there is something in those shapes that makes the stomach clench with instinctive terror. This is the true story of those who disappeared without a trace. A story that has remained buried in police files, in dismissed testimonies, and in the fragmented memory of a man who decided to bear the weight of the truth alone. Cancun would never be the same. To follow this case to its conclusion and uncover more stories like it, be sure to subscribe and activate notifications. Let us know in the comments what country you're watching from. Johann Müller was 24 years old when he decided Cancun would be the perfect destination to celebrate his graduation as an industrial engineer from the Technical University of Munich. Tall and blonde with blue eyes that reflected the innocence of someone who still believed the world was a safe place, Eric had saved for 2 years by working weekends at a Bavarian brewery to afford this dream trip to the Mexican Caribbean. On the morning of August 12, 1994, Eric put on his favorite turquoise Hawaiian shirt printed with red hibiscus flowers, a pair of beige Tommy Hilfiger linen shorts, and brown leather sandals he'd bought specifically for the trip. On his left wrist, he wore a silver Casio digital watch, a graduation gift from his parents. In his right pocket, he kept a small Polaroid of him and his girlfriend, Ingrid, hugging in the university gardens like a good luck charm. Eric's dreams were simple but profound. Return to Germany, marry Ingrid in the spring of 1995, start his own consulting firm and travel the world documenting traditional architecture. His passion for ancient structures had led him to plan an excursion to the Mayan ruins of Chichen Itza for August 14th. He would never get the chance to fulfill that dream. María Carmen Sánchez López, 19, had started working as a maid at the Playa Dorada hotel just 6 months before that fateful August night. Originally from a humble neighborhood in Cancun's Region 94, Carmen saw the job as a chance to change her family's destiny. She was the eldest of 5 siblings, the daughter of a fisherman who struggled to support his large family on the irregular income from his trade. On August 12th, Carmen arrived at work in her impeccably ironed uniform. A white short-sleeved blouse, a black knee-length skirt, black patent leather shoes, and a small white cap she always adjusted meticulously in the locker room mirror. Her mother had embroidered her initials CSL on the blouse pocket with gold thread, a small detail that made her feel special. On her right wrist, she wore a red and black string bracelet woven by her younger sister, a protective amulet that, according to family tradition, was meant to ward off bad energy. Carmen dreamed of studying hotel management, mastering English, and one day running her own tourism business. She had already planned to enroll in night classes the following month. According to the report filed on August 17, 1994 by Heinrich Müller, Eric's father, his son had last called home on the afternoon of the 12th, buzzing with excitement about the beauty of the resort. He mentioned he had befriended some hotel employees who had promised to show him the area's best-kept secrets. Police file number 84794 records the testimony of Esperanza Sanchez, Carmen's mother, who described her daughter as a responsible young woman who had never missed work without notice, and who called home every night before 11 p.m. to confirm she'd arrived safely for her shift. The personal effects later found by investigators painted a portrait of two hopeful lives cut brutally short. Eric's broken Polaroid, found 3 days later floating in a tide pool near the hotel, its image so faded that the faces were barely visible. And Carmen's string bracelet discovered tangled in a piece of coral 200 meters from the coast, its weave so deteriorated it seemed to have been submerged for far longer than just a few days. The reconstruction of the events of August 12, 1994, is based on employee testimonies, security camera footage, and Ricardo Hernández's personal logbook, records that remained archived for 3 decades until the investigation was reopened in 2024. 8:15 a.m. María Carmen Sánchez López enters the Playa Dorada hotel for her morning shift. The housekeeping supervisor, Joaquín Ramírez Coba, notes in the attendance log that Carmen arrived 15 minutes early, seeming particularly cheerful because she had secured extra shifts for the weekend. The employee area security camera shows her walking briskly down the service corridor, adjusting her white cap as she greets her co-workers. The hotel hums with perfect routine. Guests are having breakfast in the main restaurant while cleaning staff disperse to their assigned floors. Carmen is assigned to the West Wing, specifically rooms 340 to 355, a section that includes the luxury suites where the most distinguished guests stay, among them Eric Johann Müller, registered in room 347. 2:30 p.m. The hotel's point-of-sale system records the last transaction made by Eric Müller: the purchase of a bottle of mineral water and a tourism magazine from the lobby gift shop. The clerk, Carlos Mendoza Perez, would later recall that the young German man asked, in his limited Spanish, about night excursions to archaeological sites, specifically mentioning an interest in places normal tourists don't visit. 3:10 p.m. The lobby security camera records Eric talking for approximately 10 minutes with Carmen, who was heading to the service area after her lunch break. Investigators would later note that this conversation did not appear casual. Carmen gestured, pointing in different directions, seemingly giving directions or explaining something with clear enthusiasm. 9:50 p.m. The first sign that something is wrong appears in the security camera logs. Ricardo Hernández notes in his logbook, inexplicable distortion on monitor 4, image fragments every 3 to 4 seconds, like electromagnetic interference, but no apparent cause. The recordings from that night do indeed show a series of glitches that technicians could never explain. At this time, Eric should have been dining in the main restaurant, according to his 8 o'clock p.m. reservation, but the staff confirmed he never showed up. Carmen had officially finished her shift at 8 o'clock p.m., but several employees saw her in the staff area until around 9:30 p.m., apparently waiting for someone. 10 o'clock p.m. The ambient temperature that night was 22 degrees Celsius with 85% humidity, typical conditions for August in the Mexican Caribbean. However, Ricardo makes a disturbing entry in his logbook. Temperature in security booth suddenly dropped to 19 degrees for no reason, climate systems functioning normally. Official meteorological records show no such sudden temperature change in the area. 11:10 p.m. The security guard's last recorded contact with the outside world was a routine phone call to the night supervisor, Roberto Vasquez Herrera. According to the official report, Ricardo confirmed that everything was in order and that he would conduct his usual inspection round at 11:30 p.m. This would be the last coherent communication anyone would have with him for the next 5 hours. The events that followed can only be pieced together through fragmented entries in Ricardo's logbook, written in a script that grows increasingly shaky and incoherent. The entry at 11:15 p.m. reads, "Figures in pool area, not walking. They glide. Carmen is with them. Eric too. But it's not them. It can't be them." The final entry, marked at 11:47 p.m., is barely legible. "They're going toward the sea. I'm following. I can't not follow. The sand is cold as ice. The footprints aren't footprints. They're something else." On the beach, approximately 50 meters from where the hotel property ended, investigators would find the first breadcrumb of this tragedy. A standard-issue security flashlight, later identified as belonging to Ricardo Hernández. What was disturbing about the discovery was not just its location, but its condition. The metal was completely melted as if it had been exposed to a temperature exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. Yet there was no trace of fire in the surrounding area. The contrast between the hotel's perfectly documented daily routine and the night's supernatural events created a narrative tension that investigators could never satisfactorily resolve. Guests in adjacent rooms reported sleeping soundly, hearing no unusual noises. Security staff at the neighboring hotel registered no anomalous activity. It was as if the horror had unfolded inside a bubble of reality, completely isolated from the normal world. The first 48 hours after the disappearance of Eric Müller and Carmen Sanchez were marked by a cascade of errors, administrative confusion, and the technological limitations of 1994, which would turn the search into a Kafkaesque maze of lost paperwork and bungled procedures. Commander Miguel Ángel Torruco Elizondo, head of the Cancún Ministerial Police in 1994, began the investigation with a perspective that would prove fatally flawed. His initial assessment, noted in the official file on August 15th, was, "Typical case of foreign tourist running off with local employee. Will be resolved in 72 hours. This assumption would dictate the superficial approach that characterized the entire investigation. The investigators of 1994 faced technological constraints that seem prehistoric today. There were no high-definition cameras, no GPS systems, no interconnected databases, and no digital forensics. Security footage was stored on VHS tapes that were reused every week, and much of the crucial evidence was lost due to this primitive archiving system. August 14th, 1994. The first testimony to lead investigators down a dead end came from Rubén Castillo Medina, a maintenance worker at the neighboring hotel Las Brisas del Caribe. Castillo stated unequivocally that he had seen a couple matching Eric and Carmen's description boarding a collective taxi heading toward downtown Cancún at approximately 6:30 a.m. on the 13th. His testimony was recorded as primary evidence without any cross-verification. Investigators failed to consider that Castillo suffered from severe myopia and that the taxi stand was over 100 meters from his position. They also ignored the fact that he had been working for over 14 consecutive hours and, according to his co-workers, was known to see things when exhausted. For 6 days, the search focused on downtown Cancun, combing through cheap hotels, guest houses, and potential hideouts. August 15, 1994. The second false lead emerged with the discovery of a green canvas backpack in a vacant lot. The item was mistakenly identified as belonging to Eric Müller due to its European appearance and the fact that it contained a tourist map of Cancun with notes written in German. Detective Isabel Coronado Vivas, in charge of the field investigation, stated in her report, "The backpack contains definitive evidence that the subjects planned their assault in advance. Notations on the map show routes to the Belize border." It wouldn't be discovered until 3 weeks later that the backpack belonged to Klaus Hoffmann, another German tourist who had lost his luggage in an unrelated robbery a month earlier. This mix-up consumed another 4 days of the investigation, leading to checkpoints on highways to the border and alerts sent to Belizean authorities. All the while, the real evidence at the hotel was deteriorating. August 20th, 1994. The third false lead would prove to be the most devastating for the investigation. An anonymous informant reported seeing Carmen Sanchez in a seedy cantina in mainland Cancun, specifically at an establishment called El Naufragio on López Portillo Avenue. The identified suspect was Armando Velasco Neri, a 35-year-old man with a record for minor drug trafficking who had, in fact, been at the cantina on the night of the sighting. Velasco was arrested and subjected to 48 hours of intensive interrogation, during which he maintained his innocence with a steadfast consistency that should have alerted investigators to his sincerity. Commander Taruco wrote in his report on August 22nd, "Suspect shows signs of nervous guilt but maintains his version of events. Possible accomplice in a human trafficking ring. I recommend a deep investigation into his criminal connections." What Velasco truly displayed were signs of terror at being accused of crimes he had not committed, but the biased interpretation of his behavior led investigators to pursue a phantom criminal network for another 3 weeks. The technological limitations of the era are painfully evident in the file closed by the police on October 4, 1994. With no DNA analysis, no facial recognition systems, and no centralized databases, investigators relied exclusively on eyewitness testimony, paper documents, and detective intuition. Commander Taruco's final report is a monument to frustration. All conventional lines of investigation have been exhausted, case archived pending new evidence. The most unsettling breadcrumb from the entire failed investigation was discovered years later in the personal files of Detective Coronado. A crudely drawn map of the coastal area littered with confusing annotations that seemed to indicate points of interest corresponding to no real location. The notes, written in different types of ink and apparently by several different hands, included coordinates that did not match the Mexican cartographic system and symbols that belonged to no known topographical convention. Most disturbing of all was a note in the bottom margin that read, "The numbers don't lie, but they don't tell the truth either. Knows, but RH won't talk. Review logbook after October." The signature was illegible, but the initials ISEUI suggested that Detective Coronado herself had discovered something she chose to omit from her official report. So what do you think truly happened? Did the police overlook something obvious? Let me know your theory in the comments as we delve into the years of anguish that followed. And if this story is impacting you, please hit the like button so more people can learn about this case. The years following the failed 1994 investigation were marked by a sepulchral silence, punctuated only by false hopes, phantom sightings, and the gradual decay of the families who refused to accept the finality of their loss. In 1995, Heinrich Müller, Eric's father, made his first trip to Cancun on August 12th, exactly 1 year after the disappearance. He established what would become an annual ritual, walking along the beach of the Playa Dorada hotel at dawn, placing white flowers at the water's edge, and standing in silence for exactly 1 hour. For years, hotel employees would recall the image of the tall, stooped man, always dressed in the same black suit, staring at the horizon as if expecting his son to emerge from the waves. The first false sighting occurred in March 1995, when an American tourist reported seeing a young blonde man answering to the name of Eric working as a tour guide at the Tulum ruins. The Müller family immediately flew to Mexico only to discover it was a case of mistaken identity, a Swedish backpacker named Eric Johansson who happened to share the name and a few physical traits with the missing man. From 1996 to 1997, hope was rekindled when an employee at a Playa del Carmen resort contacted authorities, claiming to have recognized Carmen Sanchez working in the housekeeping department. The woman turned out to be Carmen Solis Lara, a young woman from Veracruz who had come to the Riviera Maya seeking work and shared only a name and approximate age with the missing girl. During these years, Esperanza Sanchez, Carmen's mother, developed an obsessive routine that deeply worried her family. Every Tuesday and Friday, the days her daughter used to have off, Esperanza would take the bus from the 94th district to the hotel zone and walk through every single hotel asking for her daughter. The concierges and managers in the area came to know her as the mother of the lost waitress, and many would give her money for the bus fare home out of pity. From 1998 to 2001, the sightings multiplied in unsettling ways. A fisherman from Isla Mujeres swore he had seen Eric navigating a boat in the deep waters of the Caribbean. An artisan vendor in Chichen Itza claimed to have conversed with Carmen in perfect Mayan, a language the missing young woman did not speak. Each report was meticulously investigated by the families, who hired private detectives and spent their life savings chasing shadows. The most disturbing development of this period was the birth of an urban legend among Cancun's hotel employees. According to testimonies collected by journalist Carlos Loret de Mola in 2000, several tourism workers reported nocturnal encounters with the couple of 94, two figures who would appear near the beach in the early hours of the morning, always walking toward the sea, never returning. From 2002 to 2003, the false sightings reached their cruelest point when a scam artist calling herself Esperanza Celestial contacted the Müller family, claiming to have spiritual visions of Eric's whereabouts. For 6 months, this woman emotionally extorted the family, charging for channeling sessions where she supposedly communicated with Eric's spirit to reveal clues about his location. The fraud was exposed when Esperanza Celestial made the mistake of providing details about Eric that contradicted information only the family knew. Heinrich Müller, devastated at having been manipulated in his most vulnerable moment, fell into a deep depression from which he would never fully recover. From 2004 to 2007, the years of silence grew heavier as both families began to face the reality that their loved ones were likely dead. Heinrich Müller sold his house in Munich and moved into a small apartment, dedicating all his resources to keeping the investigation alive. His health progressively deteriorated. He developed stomach ulcers, chronic insomnia, and a depression that no treatment could alleviate. On November 15, 2007, Heinrich Müller was found dead in his Munich apartment. The official cause was a myocardial infarction, but those who knew him understood he had died of a broken heart. On his nightstand was an unfinished letter addressed to Eric. Mein lieber Sohn, I have searched every corner of the world, but I cannot find you. Forgive me for giving up. From 2008 to 2024, the next 16 years passed in almost absolute silence. Esperanza Sanchez stopped her weekly pilgrimages to the hotel zone and took refuge in an extreme religiosity. Convinced her daughter had been called by God for a special mission. The case faded from collective memory, surviving only as an urban legend on internet forums dedicated to unsolved mysteries. Ricardo Hernández, the security guard, lived these years in self-imposed exile. He quit his job immediately after the events of 1994 and moved to a small fishing village on the Yucatan coast. His neighbors described him as a taciturn man who spoke only when necessary and avoided any conversation about his past in Cancún. He worked as a boat carpenter, a trade learned from his grandfather that allowed him to keep his hands busy, while his mind fought against memories he preferred to keep buried. The case became an urban legend on forums specializing in Mexican mysteries, particularly on the website Misterios del Mayab, where users with pseudonyms like Seeker94 and Silent Witness debated theories ranging from cartel kidnappings to alien abductions. After 30 years of sepulchral silence, fate was preparing a final twist that none of the conspiracy theories had ever contemplated. The most unsettling breadcrumb from all these silent years was a rusty metal box that appeared in 2019 in the basement of the old Cancun police headquarters. During remodeling work, the box contained documents and photographs from the original case, but it also included reports never officially filed, suggesting the investigation had secretly continued for several years longer than public records indicated. On May 12, 2024, 30 years after that night changed the life of Ricardo Hernández Vega forever. Destiny orchestrated a coincidence that would bring one of the most disturbing mysteries in the history of Mexican tourism back into the public eye. Ricardo, now a 58-year-old man with hands weathered by 3 decades of naval carpentry, had returned to the port of Progreso to collect the last of his belongings from his old guard shack, a closing ritual he had postponed for years, fearing it would revive memories he preferred to keep buried in the depths of his consciousness. The security company Guardian del Caribe, which had employed Ricardo during his years in Cancun's hotel zone, had permanently ceased operations in April 2024. As part of the liquidation process, long-term employees were contacted to retrieve any personal items that might have been left behind, before the building was demolished to make way for a new luxury condominium complex. The metal locker, number 47, assigned to Ricardo since 1991, had remained locked for 3 decades. The combination was a date no one else knew. 130894, the numbers representing the last night Ricardo had trusted reality as he knew it. As he opened the locker, Ricardo expected to find perhaps a change of clothes, some forgotten work documents, maybe the old portable radio that used to keep him company during the long night shifts. What he found was something far more significant and far more disturbing, a black leather logbook he didn't remember storing there. Sealed inside a transparent plastic bag along with other objects his traumatized mind had blocked from his conscious memory. The logbook, manufactured by the company Registros Profesionales S.A., and bearing the faded gold emblem of the Playa Dorada hotel on its cover, contained 200 pages of meticulous notes documenting not only the events of August 1994, but also unsettling observations that stretched back several months before the disappearance of Eric and Carmen. Ricardo sat on the cold concrete floor of the abandoned warehouse, and opened the logbook with trembling hands. His own thoughts from 3 decades ago stared back at him from the yellowed pages like ghosts of blue ink. The first entries were routine. Reports of nightly rounds, notes on late-arriving guests, minor incidents of no importance. But as he progressed toward August 1994, the handwriting grew more erratic, the observations more disturbing. The entry for August 3, 1994 described anomalous movements on security cameras during new moon, figures appear and disappear without logical pattern, unexplained drop in ambient temperature in pool area between 0212 and 400 HRS. The one for August 7th mentioned, employee Carmen conversing with German guest about special places only locals know. Something in her manner unnerves me, not the usual Carmen. But the true impact came when Ricardo found, slipped between the pages for August 1994, a photograph his mind had suppressed for 30 years. The image, a standard 8.8 by 10.7 centimeter Polaroid, was partially burned along the edges, as if it had been exposed to an intense but brief source of heat. What the photograph showed defied all logic. 2 humanoid silhouettes stood at the water's edge, but with proportions that did not correspond to normal human anatomy. The figures resembled Eric and Carmen in their general height and build, but something in their contours suggested a subtle wrongness, a distortion that made one's stomach clench instinctively upon seeing them. Ricardo felt his hands begin to shake uncontrollably. The photograph not only confirmed that the events of that night had been real, but it also explained why his mind had chosen to block certain memories. What he had witnessed was so alien to normal human experience that his psyche had built defensive walls to protect his smriti. The back of the photograph contained a note written in his own hand, a note he had no memory of writing. 13 40345 HRS. Followed them to the sea. Took this pic before they noticed. It's not them, it's something else using their forms. Should I hide this? No one would believe me. Ricardo's physical reaction was immediate and violent. He vomited on the warehouse floor as his body processed the adrenaline surge that accompanied the sudden return of repressed memories. The blocked images began to seep back into his consciousness like filthy water through a broken dam. He remembered the moment he had followed the figures to the beach, the sensation of ice-cold sand beneath his bare feet, the inhuman sound they had made when they realized he was there. He also remembered the exact moment he had taken the photograph. He had used the emergency Polaroid camera he kept on his security belt, designed to document incidents requiring immediate visual evidence. The flash had illuminated the figures for a fraction of a second, revealing details his mind refused to fully process even now, 30 years later. Most disturbing of all, he vividly remembered how the figures had turned toward him at the flash, but their faces were not human faces, though they held just enough resemblance to inspire the deepest horror he had ever known. Ricardo remained on the warehouse floor for over an hour, processing not only the rediscovery of the photograph, but also the realization that he had lived 30 years of his life with a void in his memory. A void now being filled with images that explained why he had fled Cancún, why he had abandoned his career, why he had chosen isolation and silence. The connection between the photograph and the unidentified bodies that had been washing up on the Yucatan coast in recent months became instantly, terrifyingly clear to Ricardo. Local news reports had spoken of human remains with inexplicable anatomical anomalies found by fishermen at different points along the Caribbean coast. The description of those anomalies perfectly matched the distortions captured in the photograph. Ricardo knew he could no longer remain silent. Not just for Eric and Carmen, whose families deserved answers, but because the bodies that kept turning up suggested that what happened in 1994 was no isolated event. The case officially entered the National Criminal Investigation System on June 18, 2024, when Ricardo Hernández Vega voluntarily walked into the Mexico City offices of the Special Prosecutor for Forced Disappearances. He was carrying the logbook and the photograph he had kept hidden for 3 decades. Special Prosecutor Elena Vasquez Morales, a 45-year-old woman with 20 years of experience in disappearance cases, initially met Ricardo's testimony with the professional skepticism of someone who had heard hundreds of belated confessions and testimonies fractured by trauma. However, the internal consistency of his account, the precision of his dates and details, and especially the physical photograph Ricardo offered as proof, convinced the prosecutor she was facing something extraordinary. The Müller-Sanchez case represented exactly the kind of cold case our new technologies can approach from entirely new perspectives, Prosecutor Vasquez stated in her report on June 25th. The investigative methods of 1994 were limited by the available technology. 30 years later, we have tools that can extract information that was once impossible to obtain. The first step in the modern investigation was a high-resolution digitalization of all physical materials. The photograph provided by Ricardo was subjected to spectroscopic analysis, chemical authenticity tests, and digital reconstruction, which unveiled details invisible to the naked eye. The Forensic Analysis Laboratory at the National Autonomous University of Mexico performed a multispectral scan of the photo, which revealed disturbing information. According to the technical report from July 8, 2024, the anatomical anomalies visible in the photographed subjects did not correspond to any known post-mortem deformations, nor could they be dismissed as optical illusions from the Polaroid camera. The skeletal proportions suggested alterations with no precedent in forensic medical literature. The new technologies applied to the case included ground-penetrating radar scans of the coastal area where the disappearance occurred. The investigative team used state-of-the-art soil penetrometers, capable of detecting buried anomalies up to 15 meters deep. The results obtained during the first week of August 2024 identified 3 areas of interest with anomalous soil densities that corresponded neither to natural geological formations nor to any known human construction. Pattern recognition analysis applied to disappearances along the Mexican Caribbean coast. Between 1994 and 2024 revealed unsettling correlations. The national database identified 47 disappearance cases in the region that shared specific characteristics. They occurred during nights of a new moon. The victims had exhibited unusual behavior in the hours leading up to their disappearance, and there were witness testimonies of anomalous thermal phenomena in the areas. A partial identity confirmation came from mitochondrial DNA analysis performed on bone samples found on the coast of Isla Mujeres in March 2024. On August 15th, the Forensic Genetics Laboratory of the National Institute of Criminal Sciences confirmed that one of the samples corresponded to the maternal lineage of the Sánchez López family. The official report stated, "The match across 16 mitochondrial markers establishes with 99.7% certainty that the remains belong to a direct descendant of María del Carmen Sánchez López's maternal line." But what made this discovery deeply disturbing was the condition of the remains. Osteological analysis indicated the bones had been exposed to conditions inconsistent with normal marine decomposition. The bone structure showed mineral alterations that suggested exposure to extreme temperatures and unidentified chemical substances. Investigators developed a criminal profile completely different from the one considered in 1994. Instead of searching for conventional human perpetrators, the modern analysis suggested a systematic phenomenon had been operating in the region for decades. The criminological profile drafted by behavioral analysis specialist Dr. Patricia Ramirez Solis noted, the behavioral patterns do not correspond to organized human criminal activity. The systematic nature of the events, their correlation with astronomical phenomena, and the physical characteristics of the evidence suggest the presence of factors beyond the scope of traditional criminology. The most striking quote from the 2024 official report was included in the preliminary findings presented on August 20th. The anomalies detected in the human remains, the documented environmental alterations, and the collected testimonies do not align with any known human record in national or international criminological databases. We recommend the intervention of specialists in anomalous phenomena and the consideration of explanations that transcend conventional investigative paradigms. This finding marked a turning point, transforming what had begun as a forced disappearance case into something that defied the traditional categories of the Mexican justice system. On September 3, 2024, Ricardo Hernández Vega stood before the Special Commission for the Review of Unsolved Cases, ready, at last, to reveal everything he had witnessed on that August night in 1994 that had defined the rest of his life. The hearing room on the 12th floor of the Attorney General's building was occupied by an interdisciplinary panel, including prosecutor Elena Vasquez, criminologist Dr. Fernando Castellanos Ruiz, forensic anthropologist Dr. Maria Eugenia Torres Bermudez, and trauma-specialized psychiatrist Dr. Alejandro Mendoza Herrera. Representatives from the German embassy and a lawyer for the Sanchez family were also present. Ricardo, dressed in a navy blue jacket he had bought for the occasion, had spent weeks preparing his testimony. His hands, weathered by 30 years of carpentry, held a leather folder containing not only the original logbook and photograph, but also additional drawings and notes he had made as blocked memories gradually returned. "What I am about to tell you," Ricardo began, his voice steady but heavy with 3 decades of guilt, "contradicts everything you believe to be possible. For 30 years I tried to convince myself it was a nightmare, a hallucination, a psychotic episode, but the photograph and the bodies that keep appearing confirmed that what I witnessed was real." Ricardo's testimony revealed a cover-up that had worked for decades, not through criminal sophistication but through its sheer incredibility. The security company Guardian of the Caribbean had not actively hidden evidence. It had simply implemented a reputational damage control protocol that consisted of discrediting any report that could harm Cancun's tourist image. The general manager of Guardian of the Caribbean, Roberto Sandoval Pacheco, summoned me to his office on August 15, 1994, Ricardo declared before the commission. He told me verbatim, "What you think you saw didn't happen. What you will report is that there was an electrical system failure that caused you temporary confusion. Your job and your reputation depend on you understanding this clearly." During the 90s, the company had developed an informal but effective system for handling anomalous incidents in the hotel zone. Any report involving unexplained phenomena was reclassified as confusion due to work stress, medication side effects, or the employee's psychological problems. Guards who insisted on their original stories were quietly fired and, when necessary, their mental stability was publicly questioned. The motive wasn't malicious, Ricardo explained. It was purely economic. Cancun was establishing itself as Mexico's top tourist destination. A case of mysterious disappearances with supernatural elements would have destroyed the image of a safe paradise that had been built over years. The company's indirect involvement extended to its connections with local media and tourism authorities. Sandoval had cultivated relationships that allowed him to influence media coverage of events that might affect tourism. Reporters who tried to investigate anomalous phenomena in the hotel zone suddenly found their sources refusing to talk, and their editors losing interest in the stories. The documented interrogation of Commander Miguel Ángel Torruco, retired since 2010 and located at his residence in Mérida, revealed another layer of unintentional cover-up. Torruco, now 78 and suffering from the early stages of dementia, admitted under oath that he had received suggestions from important figures in the tourism sector to handle the case with discretion. "They never explicitly asked me to hide evidence," Torruco stated in his recorded testimony on September 12th. "But they made me understand that my career depended on solving the case quickly and without generating negative publicity for Cancún. I interpreted that as an instruction to find conventional explanations." The modern investigation revealed disturbing connections to disappearances at other Mexican resorts during the 90s. Cases in Puerto Vallarta in 1995, Acapulco in 1997, Mazatlan in 1999, and Playa del Carmen in 2001 all showed identical patterns: foreign guests and local employees vanishing on new moon nights, reports of thermal anomalies, and police investigations that concluded without satisfactory results. Dr. Castellanos presented an analysis to the commission suggesting the existence of a network, not of human criminals, but of institutional cover-up that had operated for decades to protect the Mexican tourism industry from scandals. "What we have here," the criminologist explained in his presentation on September 18th, "is not an organized conspiracy, but a series of independent decisions made by different actors who all reached the same conclusion. It was more convenient to hide these events than to properly investigate them." The most shocking revelation came when Ricardo described what happened after he took the photograph on the beach. "The figures turned towards me when they heard the click of the camera," he declared, his voice breaking. "What I saw in their faces, they weren't human faces, even though they kept the general appearance of Eric and Carmen. It was as if something was wearing their bodies like costumes." Ricardo continued. "They moved towards me. They didn't walk. They glided over the sand, making no sound. When they were close, I felt a cold that pierced me to the bone. One of them, the one in Eric's shape, opened its mouth and let out a sound that wasn't human. It was like the sound of wind rushing through a deep cave." The truth was more terrifying than any theory proposed over 30 years of speculation. These were not conventional human crimes, but something that defied all understanding of the natural world. What you are about to discover is more disturbing than you can imagine. If you think you can handle it, keep listening, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. On July 22, 2024, Judge Carmen Beatriz Montoya Cervantes issued the judicial order to officially reopen the case that had remained dormant for 3 decades. Judicial Resolution 3847/2024 stated that sufficient elements exist to determine that the original investigation was inadequate, and that new technological and testimonial evidence justifies a complete review of the case. The order included extraordinary provisions, authorizing forensic analysis of the entire coastline within a 5-kilometer radius of the Playa Dorada hotel, including underwater excavations up to 30 meters deep. It also ordered the exhumation and reanalysis of all unidentified human remains that had washed ashore on the Mexican Caribbean coast since 1994. The new forensic team included specialists from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, the National Institute of Anthropology and History, and international consultants from the FBI and Interpol. For the first time in Mexican judicial history, it also incorporated consultants specializing in anomalous phenomena from the University of Virginia's Institute for Research of Unexplained Phenomena. Ricardo Hernández received official recognition for his courage, but the weight of his silence had left indelible marks on his psyche. "I did the right thing in the end," he said in an exclusive interview on August 15, 2024. "But that doesn't erase the 30 years that the family suffered without answers because of my cowardice." The Mexican state granted Ricardo a lifetime pension and full medical coverage, acknowledging he was a victim of workplace trauma and that his testimony was crucial in clarifying one of the most complex cases in the country's criminal history. On August 12, 2024, the family of María Carmen Sánchez López held a symbolic funeral in Cancún. Esperanza Sánchez, now 71 and her health worn down by decades of grief, placed a wreath of white flowers on an empty grave while a mariachi band played her daughter's favorite song. "Now I know my Carmen didn't abandon her family," Esperanza said through tears. "Something took her, but she didn't choose to leave." A memorial for Erich Johann Müller was held simultaneously in Munich, Germany. His college girlfriend Ingrid Hoffmann, now married with children, traveled from Berlin to lay flowers on his symbolic grave. "Erich was a dreamer," she recalled, weeping. "He always said he wanted to live extraordinary adventures. I never imagined his adventure would end up being so extraordinary. And so terrible." The results of the forensic excavations completed in October 2024 confirmed the presence of human remains in 3 different locations, all exhibiting the same structural anomalies that had baffled investigators. But carbon-14 dating revealed something even more unsettling. The remains were of different ages, some dating back to the 1970s, others to the 80s, and the most recent corresponding indeed to 1994. The investigation officially concluded that Erich Müller and Carmen Sánchez had been victims of a recurring phenomenon of an undetermined nature, one that had been active in the area for at least 5 decades. The final report, partially classified for reasons of national security, stated that while it was not possible to determine the exact nature of the phenomenon responsible for these disappearances, the evidence confirmed that the victims were subjected to processes that transcend our current scientific understanding. The case didn't end the day they vanished. It ended when someone dared to speak the truth. The coastal zone where the events occurred was designated a special area of scientific interest and remains under constant monitoring by interdisciplinary teams, comprising anthropologists, physicists, marine biologists, and specialists in anomalous phenomena. Since the investigation was reopened, no further disappearances matching the identified pattern have been recorded. Ricardo Hernández continues to live on the Yucatan coast, but he now receives regular visits from investigators, journalists, and the families of other victims of similar disappearances. He has established a foundation, Buried Truths, dedicated to supporting the families of the missing and promoting the importance of breaking the silence when one holds crucial information about unsolved crimes. The truth is not always easy to accept, Ricardo reflects in the final lines of his official testimony. But it is the only thing that can bring peace to the dead and to the living who are left behind. For 30 years I lived with the weight of knowing something no one else did. Now, that weight is shared among all of us, and that makes it bearable. The mystery of what truly happened on that Cancun beach in August of 1994 remains unsolved, but it no longer remains in silence. The families have partial answers. The justice system has officially acknowledged the reality of the events. And society has learned a valuable lesson about the cost of silence when the truth is at stake. The story of Ricardo Hernández, Erich Müller, and Carmen Sánchez has become a permanent reminder that there are mysteries in this world that defy our comprehension. But this does not absolve us of the responsibility to seek the truth. and to honor the memory of those who were lost along the way. If you've made it this far, it's because this story has touched you deeply. Subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next case. Let me know in the comments what case you'd like me to investigate next. Do you know of an unsolved case in your country? Drop it in the comments below. Give this video a like if you want more stories like this, and share it with someone who appreciates well-researched true crime. I'll see you in the next case.